She thought the worst was over when her husband left her with 3 children. But the real horror was just beginning. She found her quiet life turned into a maze of lies and secrets. A mysterious private detective, surveillance in the dark, and mysterious documents that could cost her her life. It seems her ex-husband has hidden far more than she could have imagined. Now it's up to her to not only survive, but to protect her children from those who are eager to get their hands on these secrets. My name is Lisa, I'm 32 years old and I live in New York City. Life has always been difficult for me, but I never thought things could get this hard. The day my life was turned upside down was an unremarkable fall evening. The kids were playing in the living room and I was cooking dinner in the kitchen. It was quiet and peaceful, as if nothing portended trouble. The door opened and Bill walked in. His face was grim and his eyes were droopy. I sensed something wrong at once. Something in his demeanor was wrong. He sat down in a chair without saying a word. I went over to him and took his hand. "What's the matter, darling? You look tired." Bill looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something unfamiliar. A coldness, a detachment. He exhaled slowly and said, "Liz, I need to talk to you." We walked to the bedroom, closing the door. Bill sat on the edge of the bed, head down. I sat next to him, waiting to see what he would say. Finally, he spoke. "I can't live like this anymore. I feel depressed, tired of the routine. I want to change. Freedom." I stared at him, not believing my ears. "How can you just walk away like that? No explanation, no remorse?" "Bill, please tell me what happened. Let's try to work this out together." He just shook his head. "No, Liz. I've made up my mind. I'm leaving. Forever." His words came out of the blue. I couldn't believe this was actually happening. My husband, the father of my 3 children, is going to leave us. The thought of being alone with the babies made me shudder. But how could you do that? We're family. You can't just walk away. Bill stood up, walking across the room. He avoided my gaze, as if ashamed of himself. "I'm sorry, Liz. I can't live like this anymore. I need time to sort myself out." He opened the closet, started packing. I sat on the bed, unable to move. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I couldn't stop them. Bill finished stowing the suitcase, picked it up, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to hold on to the remnants of hope. He stopped, turned around. "I don't know. I'll find a place to live, contact a lawyer. Stay home, take care of the kids." And he left. He just took his suitcase and went somewhere without even telling me where he was going to live. At that moment, my life fell apart. I was left alone with 3 little girls, no husband, no support, no money. I had worked until the birth of my children, but then I decided to devote myself to my family. Now I had to find work to feed us all. The first months after Bill left were the hardest months of my life. I looked for any job I could to provide for the children. I got a job as a waitress at a cafe near my home. It was hard work, especially at night when the kids were asleep and I had to work late. But I managed. Neighbors and friends supported me and sometimes stayed to watch the girls while I was at work. Gradually, I got used to the new rhythm of life and learned to cope with everyday problems. As the months passed, I still couldn't believe that he had really left us. My thoughts kept going back to the day he announced his decision. I remembered every word, every look, trying to find some explanation for his actions. But there was no answer. All that was left was pain and a sense of betrayal. At first, I hoped he'd come to his senses and come back. Maybe it was just a temporary crisis, and he would soon realize what a mistake he had made. But as the days went by, I didn't hear from him. I called him, left messages, but he didn't answer. And I have 3 small children who need a father who always promised to be there for them. After 6 months, I realized there was no point in waiting any longer. Bill wasn't coming back. I couldn't afford to stay attached to a man who didn't want to be part of our family. Inside, I felt empty and alone. I had lost not only my husband but my faith in people, in love, in the future. But I had no choice. I had to get up and move on. I focused on my children. I tried to give them maximum attention, to surround them with love and care. We started to build a new life without Bill. Little by little, I got used to it. Yes, it was difficult, but I knew I could cope. After all, I have 3 wonderful daughters to live and fight for. One day, coming back from work, I noticed that I was being followed. Someone was following me from a distance, hiding in the shadows. I quickened my step, but the person continued to follow me. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking. What should I do? Call the police? But I had no proof that it wasn't an accident. At home, I told my friend about it. She told me to be careful, not to go out alone at night. But how could I turn down the job? I had no other choice. Every night I went out into the street with my heart pounding, waiting for someone to appear from the darkness. A week later, I was followed again. This time the man came closer. I stopped, turned to face him. It was a middle-aged man dressed in a dark suit. He smiled, handed me a business card. Mrs. Brown, you're probably wondering why I've been following you. I can explain. I took the card, read the name. John Smith, private investigator. What did he want from me? Let's talk, John suggested. There's a cafe nearby, we can talk about it there. We went to the nearest cafe and sat down at a table in the corner. John ordered a coffee, then began to tell us, your situation has attracted the attention of certain people. Your ex-husband, Bill, has been involved in some very questionable activities. Perhaps that's why he disappeared so suddenly. It took my breath away. What did he mean by that? Bill always seemed like an honest man, a hard worker. How could he be involved in crime? Tell me more, I demanded. John nodded. Bill worked for a large corporation that supplied medical supplies. But, as it turned out, some of those supplies were going to the black market. Your children could have been harmed if he had stayed with you. I was shocked. How was that possible? Why didn't Bill tell me about this? Or was he involved in this criminal activity himself? What's going to happen now? I asked, feeling dizzy. You need to be careful, Mrs. Brown. There's a possibility that the people your husband was cooperating with may try to reach out to you. They may think you know something important. My heart is clenched with fear. What do I do? How do I protect myself and the children? The next weeks passed in constant tension. I tried to be as careful as possible, checking to see if anyone was following me. John promised to keep me informed of any new information about Bill's case. But each day brought new worries. One morning as I was getting ready for work, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I saw a man in a suit. He introduced himself as Bill's lawyer, Mr. Williams. He handed me an envelope and said it was important information regarding our divorce. I opened the envelope and inside were documents and a letter from Bill. In the letter he wrote that he was sorry for what had happened, that he didn't mean to hurt me. He also asked me to give the packet of papers to John Smith, a private investigator. Bill claimed that these papers would help reveal the whole truth about the company's activities. I contacted John and we arranged to meet. He scrutinized the documents, then looked at me. This is a serious matter, Mrs. Brown. It appears that your husband was involved in a fraudulent scheme involving a pharmaceutical company. These documents may help the police to arrest those responsible. But why didn't he report it sooner? I asked, not understanding how Bill could hide such important information. John sighed. He was probably afraid for your safety. If he had told you, you could have been in danger. It was better to hide and try to figure out the situation on your own. I was a little relieved. At least now I knew Bill was trying to protect us. But what to do next? That evening, when I got home from work, I found the house broken into. All the closets were open, things strewn across the floor. Someone had obviously been looking for something specific. I called John immediately. He arrived a half hour later, inspected the house, then said, "It looks like someone is looking for the very documents Bill gave you. You must be very careful, Mrs. Brown. These people will stop at nothing." I was in a panic. What do I do? How do I protect myself and my children? John advised me to move in with friends or relatives for a while, until the police could get to the bottom of the situation. The next day I packed up and moved in with a friend. The kids were scared, but I tried to reassure them by telling them it was temporary. John promised to keep in touch and let me know of any progress in the investigation. A week went by, another. No news from John. I was beginning to lose hope. Maybe Bill was wrong to give me these documents. Maybe no one was interested in them. But one night, as I was putting the kids to bed, there was a knock on the door. I cautiously went to the window, looked down. John was standing there, 2 policemen beside him. "Mrs. Brown, open up, please," John said. "We need to talk urgently." I went downstairs, opened the door. The policeman came inside, looked around. "What happened?" I asked, feeling my heart racing in my chest. John looked at me seriously. "We found your husband. He's alive, but he's in the hospital. He needs your help." The police car took me to the hospital. Bill was lying in a room hooked up to life support machines. His face was pale, with bruises under his eyes. A doctor sat next to him and explained that Bill had been seriously injured while trying to escape from his pursuers. I walked over to the bed, took his hand. He opened his eyes, looked up at me. His eyes were filled with pain and remorse. "Liz, I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to." I didn't know what to say. Too much had happened in the last few months. But I knew this wasn't the time to blame him. The important thing was to save him. "You're safe, Bill," I said, trying to sound confident. "The police know everything. You have nothing to be afraid of anymore." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath. The doctor left the room, leaving us alone. "Did the papers help?" Bill asked. I nodded. Yes, thanks to them, the police were able to arrest several key figures. The rest was just a matter of time. Bill tried to smile, but pain interrupted his attempt. "Thank you, Liz, for everything. I'll never forget it." I snuggled into his shoulder, feeling the tears roll down my cheeks. Despite everything that had happened, I still loved this man. I loved the father of my children. Over the next few days, Bill gradually recovered. The police continued to investigate, and soon all those responsible were brought to justice. Thanks to the documents that Bill passed on, many crimes were prevented and many lives were saved. Our story ended happily. Bill came home and we began to rebuild our family. The children were happy to see their daddy, and I realized that true love can survive any trials. Life went on, and I knew there were new challenges ahead. But now I was confident that we could overcome any challenges. Together.